All right. So thanks, all of you, for being here. I guess to start, maybe each of you can sort of introduce yourself, who you work for, what you do, and why you are uniquely situated to be on this panel.
Great. Thanks for that. My name is Anthony Bartolo. I work for Tata Communications. We are a global telecom provider. We're the service provider to the service providers around the world. Some 2,000 relationships with carriers, some 900 relationships with mobile network operators. I happen to run the collaboration, IoT, and mobility business. We're a cross-border mobility specialist that is access agnostic.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Ted. I'm from a company which is not that famous to you, but it is the biggest computer maker on this planet. We are making 1 out of every 3 laptops. And we are also making huge amount of servers for companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon. So basically, Quanta is a company that can make wearable smartphone, tablet, and all the way to the big servers inside the server rooms. I'm the CTO of the company. I'm in charge of research, and I try to. My job is to transform the company through innovations and research. Thank you.
Hi, I am Malcolm Rodrigues from MyRepublic. MyRepublic, we're a broadband operator. We started in Singapore. Now we operate in Singapore, Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand. We're also launching a mobile service in all 4 markets later this year. We're big believers in small cells. We're big believers in IoT. And we ultimately believe that fixed operators are extremely well positioned to support that 5G IoT world that's coming.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alvin. I lead the GE Digital business in this part of the world, in ASEAN. GE Digital, so you think of GE as a large industrial company. GE Digital, as a company, it's already a $5 billion software company. So we are really into the industrial Internet of Things space, and we have a platform and operating system called Predix that actually drives all of the IoT applications.
All right, cool. So we're going to be talking about a few different things here today. Talking about the future of mobile technology, 5G, future of Internet of Things, and how everything works together. I want to start with the mobile piece and 5G and where things are in terms of the deployment of 5G, how far away it is, when we can expect to have these networks up and running, and what the difference will be.
Who do you want to start?
With whoever wants to start.
Anyone want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
All right. 5G, so deployment. There's lots of different schools of thought around when 5G actually gets deployed. There's your first location or country of being deployed, and then there's when does it get deployed so that the user base can actually get the value of it, because a lot of users want to roam around the world, etc., and they want to have a 5G connectivity in a major scaled way. I think the beginnings of the rollouts probably will begin at the end of this year, probably start to pick up speed over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. I think there are also 2 different schools of thoughts with regards to the type of operators that are going to deploy it. Operators have spent a lot of money deploying their 4G or 4.5G type of services. They're going to want to sweat those assets. Those assets are significant expenditure. We're seeing them being utilized. There's also some backhaul questions or concerns about 5G. Is there enough backhaul to service the base stations, etc.? So I think those things need to be ironed out, and the answer is a bit different on a country-by-country basis and a jurisdiction-by-jurisdiction basis.
I think Anthony already covered almost all the aspects, but something I would like to add is for us, 5G is the last mile to complete many advanced services. I mean, currently people talking about big data analytics services, talking about smart services through artificial intelligence, and basically before 5G, when we try to deliver, new services anytime, anywhere to anyone, we are talking about user-generated data. We are talking about smartphone. But for 5G is totally different. We are not talking about just mobile communication. We are talking about connectivity to connect a device so that we can collect not just user-generated data, but also sensor-generated data, and all the way to the cloud. And in addition, it's very important that we are no longer using centralized office for all the computing and also the communications, but also we use the edge to be computing, to be very close to the content and data to do that. So in such a way that actually I think it's very exciting, but also very disruptive. But I think within the 5G architecture, there are many more applications should be created through the young startups.
So MyRepublic, we're an operator. We were looking at the mobile license in Singapore, the 4th license that came up last year. And we went through a lot of soul searching around what network would we build with that license. We were looking at 4.5G, 5G looked to be around the corner. And the conclusion we came to, it's you've almost got to stop worrying about the wireless technology and start focusing on what people would use it for. So I worked at operators for the last 20 years. And every 3 years, Nokia or Ericsson would come and say, hey, I've got a new technology for you. You should upgrade from 2G to 2.5G, from 2.5G to 3G. And we kind of did it blindly. It was actually a good thing, because when people built 3G networks, they had nothing to use it for. They just sat there empty. And ultimately, all the operators ended up having these unlimited dongles, which kind of spurred Apple to develop an iPhone. So it was actually, I think without a empty 3G network around the world, smartphones may not exist today. So there's kind of a benefit to kind of developing technology. But today, I think when we look at 5G, we stop thinking about 5G. We start thinking about what are the services and what are the applications, what are the devices that would use it. So a lot of operators now are densifying their networks. They kind of go from macro networks at 4.5G. They're putting in small cells. They're putting in femtocells inside homes. They're putting in wireless offload in public areas. You're getting to the point now where you can actually deliver IoT enterprise applications very, very effectively without 5G. The capability of these densified networks allows you to get out there and start to offer services today. So, we fundamentally believe that it's really around what do people do in the home with IoT, what do you need out when you're outside the home and outside the workplace. And we think a lot of that development will happen today before 5G comes, and 5G will actually maybe look to optimize what we do as opposed to be the technology we're all waiting for before we change what we're doing.
All right. So this is how GE looks at this, right? So if you kind of look at 2G, it's about data. If you look at 3G, 2G is about voice, 3G is about data, 4G is about video. And if you think about 5G, we think about industrial internet and the economic value that brings around with it. So let me kind of give you a bit of a use case, right? So can you imagine a fireman fighting fire in a building? He's got augmented reality. As he kind of moves across the building trying to fight fire, he can see the insides of the building digitally, right? So the ability to augment, having that augmented reality to real time. Think about hologram, right? The ability to kind of move that hologram to where you are today. Because today you use, whether it's the Ethernet cable to try to drive some of the bandwidth. So 5G is really bringing that entire bandwidth to where you are. Think about autonomous vehicles in a smart city and how you kind of move that autonomous vehicle and how do you bring augmented reality to that autonomous vehicle. So again, as GE thinks about this and our partnership with the likes of Qualcomm, Nokia, Ericsson, as we launched this in Barcelona just recently, leveraging the Predix platform that GE has to really bring that whole industrial internet application to life. So we really believe in 5G, and we believe that this would really happen in, by the end of 17 and into 18.
Okay. So I'm a little surprised because I really expected more of a bull case for 5G, and I feel like we have some skeptics on the panel. Like, someone want to talk me through what the applications are that are going to drive the adoption and, more importantly, drive the investment behind these new networks? Who wants to make the bull case for 5G?
Okay, well, I'll take a bit of a crack at it. I don't think there's a particular application. I mean, not the application the way we think about applications today. The killer application for 4G was the smartphone. The smartphone effectively facilitated a whole slew of applications that actually drove the growth and popularity and what we enjoy out of 4G today. But what's actually happening now is something quite interesting, and it goes back to the CIO. We speak to hundreds of CIOs around the world each year, and they all use a buzzword called digital transformation or business transformation. And what that fundamentally means when you ask them, when you sit down and ask them, can you peel that back for me? What do you actually mean? They'll talk about mobility. They'll talk about mobility being at the center of that thought process, meaning they're taking applications which was at their desktop and now migrating them to a mobile device, either exclusively to the mobile device or a bit of both. So what that actually means, if you take that progression along for a little bit, now those applications are on their mobile device, therefore those applications are mission critical or business critical, and now the mobile device becomes mission critical or business critical. Not a BYOD activity to cost save, but now a key tool inside an enterprise. Now that device is mission critical or business critical, therefore connectivity becomes no longer optional. That connectivity now, regardless of where you roam, regardless of where you go, is going to be absolutely key. And it's going to be data driven. So we're going to see the use of data absolutely hockey stick in the next few years. We have seen it hockey stick to this particular point in time. We think it'll keep on going. And we think the applications we look and talk about today, you're going to think are children's toys in 3 or 4 years' time. Because what 5G and mobile connectivity in the future is going to allow you to do is the ability for the application to not only just look for an IP connection, but imagine if it looks at the mobile device now and says, okay, it's not only just an IP connection, but what type of connection? Is it Wi-Fi? Is it 5G? Is it 4G? What if you could put analytics down that particular pipe? Now the developers will develop applications that are much smarter than they are today, and they will change their behavior based on the type of connectivity in a locale. So I think you'll see that type of development and capabilities that come down the pipe, which will pull and necessitate 5G over the long term, medium to long term. I just don't think it's going to happen in the course of the next year, because I think these things are a slow burn, but I think we're going to learn to not being able to live without it.
Anyone else?
So
we don't have to go down the line,
okay,
too.
Sure.
That's the other thing.
I would say that from technology point of view, I mean, technology is not the future, and actually it's only the means for you to get there. So the most important thing is about the imaginations of that technology. And nowadays, one of the the possible applications happen instantly is so about VR and AR, because of the bandwidth. With that kind of bandwidth and 5G technology, and basically you can free from the wild, and you can still get a very wonderful user experience and the augmented reality, no matter where you are. And based on that, of course, you can, based on the image, the things you capture, you can automatically, send a message or the image or the voice to the data centers for processing, to help you to understand, the context of the things, of the vision that you are really care about. So that is one of the applications. On the big bandwidth, side. On the other side is, there are also many, the applications around. They only, that kind of sensor only produce a very small amount of, data, but you need to monitor every day and take, medical sensors. Take, for example, take the industrial 4.0 applications for example. Within 5G framework, actually, you can free all these kind of, possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of, from a perspective of the industrial internet and the use cases, I think what 5G has done, and the fact that it's of much higher bandwidth, low latency, and ability to really drive applications at remote areas, right? I mean, for GE, we spend a lot of our time and efforts with our customers in remote location, be it power plants, be it oil fields. I think this is where we believe from a maintenance standpoint and how we send people out, or how customers send their maintenance crew out, how do we use that, whether it's augmented reality, use ability to maintain it from a digital perspective, how do we enable and empower those maintenance crew out there in real time and dynamically? How do they communicate with people at the command center? So I think a lot of these technologies and the higher bandwidth is going to enable us to think through new and innovative ways of how we drive, be it maintenance, be it repair, be it creating new innovations out in the field, right?
So the other part of this is, the Internet of Everything and this idea of, always on connected IoT devices. And I wonder how much of the devices that are being connected actually need to be connected, and sometimes, does my toaster need to have a Wi-Fi connection, or does it need to have a 5G connection? Can we talk about some of the applications going forward that are going to make sense, and some that don't, that are being put out there on the market?
I think it's a good question. I think there are some spaces that it makes more sense because of the value it brings. So an example would be the safety area. What value do you put on safety in a life? It's usually a non-arguable topic, and that's a place where IoT brings some real value. So, for instance, if you're in India, a topical situation is women's safety, being able to bring some type of device that's easily accessible, regardless of the connectivity in other spaces, starts to become quite important. Whether it's in dangerous environments, mining environments, steel plants, etc., having a wearable device that's IoT enabled that can not only sense maybe temperature, humidity, but also the vital statistics of an individual. They're areas where you'll see adoption quite quickly, regardless of some of the cost curve metrics that we normally see. Smart cities are a big deal, particularly in developing nations, but also in nations such as Singapore, which is quite advanced, where we want to take that next level. For those of us who live here in Singapore, it is quite a unique place when it comes to the use of public utilized data. And IoT is just another enabler for sensors that are out there that the public can leverage from that data perspective, whether it's for convenience or whether it's for health and safety or whether it's to reduce costs for the taxpaying community. So there are particular areas that are at the forefront that are going to be taken up. And then there's, behind that, a huge tail of things that you wouldn't even dream about as a product person. You probably couldn't identify, okay, there's a market for this. But what IoT is doing is it's unlocking the innovation within every business. Every business sits back and says, okay, if I had a sensor in these once hard to identify flows within their organizations, imagine how efficient I can get. And therefore they derive a value, and therefore they build a business case for IoT. So that's what we're seeing. But those first couple of cases we're seeing as very early adopters at massive scale.
I think it's a question of what should be connected, what shouldn't be connected, what are the benefits. And the reality is we're coming into an information age that is unparalleled, and the access to data. And if you try to kind of articulate the value of having your toaster connected, you might say, well, it doesn't really make any sense. But the data that gets collected, ultimately, you pull it back together, and you talk about smart home. You're taking information sensors from everywhere, and then you can choose what to take and what to use. But not having access to that information, that data, and those sensors, it limits you, right? So part of it is bringing that data to a manageable point, and then kind of opening it up and saying, what do you do with it? How do you make your life better? How do you make energy more efficient homes? So and the reality is, one thing we learned, so as telcos, what telcos historically tried to do is do it all themselves. They said, I've got more data than anybody in the world on my customer. I've got location data. I've got information on what they're kind of doing. The whole, in the US, there's debates about what they can and can't use. But if you start to take that data and you expose it to the development community, and you say, if you had this data, how could you improve what's out there? How could you make life better? How could you create more interesting applications? That's when you start seeing an exponential growth in the value of the apps and the services that kind of come. It isn't trying to predetermine whether this is interesting or not. The point is the sensor technology is there. You start to bring it, and then you make it available, and you'll start to see that change. So I think, whether it's 5G, whether it's just IoT, or it's just sensor technology, that data will be gathered, and then you'll start to see a meteoric development in how it's used, hopefully for good.
So I think that brings up an interesting point and something that I wanted to get to later, but let's just jump right in, and that's a question of privacy. And we used to live in a world where we basically had to opt in to having our devices or our applications connected to things. But now they come out of the box with sensors, or they come out of the box and they instantly connect. And I feel like there's a bit of tension between the data that device makers or carriers or service providers want to collect, and that which the end consumer actually wants to share, and what the implications are for user privacy around that, and how you protect that and make sure that people are opting in.
I think the consumer decides, regardless of the policy, the risks, the ramifications. The consumers make that decision, and consumers have a history of making some really interesting decisions. And you've all made one already in the past. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have actually read the EULA, which is the user rights for the applications that you download. Most of the time when I ask that question, nobody puts their hands up, and sometimes their data is being used, and they agree to that just by downloading the capability in the first place. Because there's a trade-off. There's a convenience trade-off that you gain versus the privacy that you give up. And everyone makes those choices individually. In the late 80s or what have you, people made a choice with mobile technology. Before mobile technology was even around, every phone that was developed, the landline phones, they were developed to the point where you could hear a pin drop in the background. There was dedicated labs to decide whether a phone was fit for the user. But when a mobile phone came out, we quickly threw the concept out of clarity for convenience. We tolerated poor quality phone calls for the sheer convenience. So if we can make those type of trade-offs, you'll find that the human capacity to make other trade-offs such as privacy, they'll make on their own accord until they either they accept the risks that they may get bitten. But I think this generation has been very open in what they'll share with to this particular date, and I think that'll also open up different industries to protect those particular consumers. So I think the consumer as a whole will make that decision, and I think they've sort of already made it just by looking at looking at how many users there are on either Facebook or LinkedIn or other particular mechanisms as proxies for user data. If they can get a benefit from it and they can actually see it, then I think they'll be okay contributing to that overall data pool.
I guess the question comes when consumers don't know that they're making a choice. And a good example of that is, TV usage data, right? People are buying televisions and they don't know that those televisions are then sharing data back to a service provider or back to the manufacturer. And so, we live in a world where these devices are connected, they're phoning home, and the consumer might not know that. Right. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah. Once again, I think people ultimately there's a collective intelligence that takes place. We're all sort of connected in a way. It doesn't take long for people to find out the nefarious ways that some of this data is being used, and then we make an adjudication on whether we want to contribute to that or not. Usually these loopholes or backdoors or ways that we may not be comfortable with, they come to light fairly quickly given the news cycles that we have. So I would argue that, yes, they'll exist for a period of time, but they would not exist if the collective decides that it's something that collectively we don't want to happen. I mean, that's the opinion that I have.
Right. Anyone else?
I think this is a very good question. Sometimes it's not just about data security, and it's not only about sensors, because another side of sensor is actually actuators. If you recall that many years ago, that GM launched the first telematics systems, and they put sensors inside the car, and there is a call center, so they understand what's going on inside the car. When there is some safety issues, actually they can shut down the whole car remotely. But the point is that it is the consumer's own decision to sign that kind of contract, and trigger that kind of actions to GM so that they can follow that kind of policy to make it happen. But the reason why I mentioned actuator is also very important, because we are not just collecting information, but we are also, pushing the final decisions back to the IoT devices. And that kind of decision making or that kind of action is also very important for the end user. And sometimes it's related to different kind of arrangement to make the whole environment, IoT environment, even more smarter and effective.
So another question sort of along those lines is that when you have an entire group of applications or services or devices that are always on and always connected, there's the question of security. We've seen several examples over the last 6 months to year of these IoT devices being hacked and being made into botnets. And so from a security standpoint, how do we protect against people breaking into a device and using it for ill, whether that's against the consumer or against some other third party?
We'll be discussing, security is like death and taxes. We're going to be talking about it in every session, with every product, with every new innovation and technology. It's just something that's inescapable. I mean, we talked about the IoT device, but let's take a look at the simple camera that's on your laptop. Some people cover it up with a little piece of tape. They know that it could be hacked. Other people don't. So you make those choices. That's the reality of life. I think we all crave innovation for personal convenience or personal productivity enhancements, and we make those calls. I suspect that IoT will be subject to security risks, much like every other technology that's come before it, and that'll spawn another industry for a lot of the other entrepreneurs that are in the room. but we'll tackle it. If we see the value in IoT, we will make that compromise on what the risks are or what we're willing to spend to mitigate those particular risks around IoT.
Yeah, you know, if you kind of look at security, it's a holistic view, right? Security in depth that we think about. And so when you think about IoT, you think about edge to cloud. You think about how you want to secure that data at the edge, at the asset level, all the way to the cloud, and how we protect that. And this is where, you know, from a GE standpoint, we believe in really a platform approach and really securing that platform. We believe in edge approach, having an edge device, edge compute, and how do you take that data all the way to cloud, and how do you secure and encrypt the entire as the data flow. So, you know, one of the first things that GE did when we kind of built the software business or the application business is we bought a OT security company called Worldtech. So about 3.5 years ago, GE really invested and said, if we want to be in the industrial internet world, we want to be in the IIoT world, that would be the first thing we want to do. And this is kind of how we look at it, right? To really say, it's not just like what Anthony said earlier, it's not about just devices or technology, it's also about process, it's also about how we use it, right? And how we think about things like data, classification, and how do we decide on what's at the edge and what's at the cloud. So security encompasses really in depth in everything we do.
You know, these are such early days. There's millions of new devices that are kind of entering into the ecosystem. There's way more data. You know, enterprises are much more security conscious when they build an IoT app for their fleet. You know, they've built in security. They've bought the app. They've got an integrator to put that together. You have SMEs that have security cameras. There's the data stored on a server. The server has no firewall. People can kind of hack it and work on it. Today you have various levels of security across consumer, businesses, SME. You'll continue to have that in an IoT world. I think to Alvin's point, you'll start to see more platforms. You'll start to buy a service, a smart home or a smart business or a specific application that's not just a series of devices that you try to connect together and make work, but it's an ecosystem that's got kind of built-in multi-layers of security. So over time that's coming, and that'll be something. Today you can go and buy a camera or a sensor for your light. Tomorrow you'll buy an ecosystem of services that connects everything together and pulls it all. So I think we're kind of in transition. I think before you kind of had email, we were all obsessed with securing access to our email. People would hack websites, you'd secure your website, and now there's just way more stuff that's gathering data. A lot of that data is benign and not harmful, but some of it potentially is. But I think you'll see the security ultimately catch up to it, and the way people could decide how to more intelligently consume that information or those technologies, they'll start to take privacy and data and data security into perspective.
I think the level of security that people needs around IoT depends on the data security and also on the applications. For example, if we treat the money as data, are you willing to put all your money in the bank, or are you trying to balance the security, so you try to put some money in cash inside your home? So if you think that the bank is just like a cloud, actually there are some places that you can store your data and still provision different kinds of services to you. Cloud could be scaled out, cloud could be scaled inside the home. And so and nowadays the computing, I used to be in the aerospace industry. The phone, the computing power that we have inside the phone is much, much stronger than the satellite. So basically, there are many things that we can do, between cloud and also the ground. And so there are people are talking about fog computing and other, things. But I believe that, just like credit card is getting more popular. I mean, there will be one day that people will trust, this kind of applications totally. Yeah.
Just to bring up another point, and Malcolm's mentioned this now on a couple of questions, where the knitting together of things is more important than singular product. So you use the example of the toaster. The toaster as a toaster being connected is just one thing, and it's quite benign. But when you look at it, a data scientist would look at that as a data point amongst a continuum of data points they can draw information from.
Yeah.
Likewise with security. If you look at the IoT device as a security risk on that device, you may be right as a single entity, but think about it in the context of you might have 15 sensors in that room. What if all of them are looking out for each other? And then the security net is a little bit different than just that singular device. And I think we're on a path, as Malcolm mentioned, and I think we're on the beginning of this particular journey where you'll see other devices helping out other things from a security perspective, not only from a connectivity perspective or any other perspective or data collecting perspective.
Okay. So I guess the last question for this panel is, we've been talking a lot about networks and carriers and devices and manufacturers and all that. Where are the areas of innovation that startups can participate in, or what will these technologies enable that a company that's not a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate can participate in?
I fundamentally believe it's around information gathering. It's about gathering data sets. It's around doing analytics on those data sets and actually providing that next generation of services and products into the market. And some of it's for analytics that say they can maybe be a bit more predictive, but it's also taking that data and actually understanding where there's problems that are out there, and people can start to work on it. So it's really, there's a world of data that we've never been exposed to before that's coming, and there's an opportunity for us to actually take it and turn it into something that actually improves the lives of the population.
So I think, from what we see from GE's standpoint, is the consumer IoT, you will bring hundreds of billions of dollars in productivity, savings, and revenue. But if you think about the 50 billion machines, the 9 billion of people connecting machines to machines, machines to people, you're looking at $1 trillion of opportunity. So I think from the standpoint of not just the consumer IoT or the consumer internet, but if you looked at the IIoT, the industrial Internet of Things, we see huge potential. And that's when machines comes to life, not just devices, but machines interacting with devices, machines interacting with machines, machines interacting with people. And that's kind of what it moves the needle to a lot of, these big companies or industrial companies out there. And I think, for startups, we welcome that. We want startups to start thinking about how do we save energy? How do we start monitoring clean water? How do we fight the forest fire using IoT? How do we be smarter in the way we plant, palm oil, rubber, paper and pulp? How do we think about IoT driving the plantations of the future, for example? So I think the whole innovation and ideas is going to be limitless if you think about the industrial Internet of Things.
I think this is a very interesting topic, Internet of Everything and 5G. It is actually not a blue ocean or red ocean. It's a blue sky. So simply, free your imagination and go for it, and you will get something from it. Yeah.
My advice to startups is take a look at what you're doing and focus on what you're doing. Don't reinvent the wheel. There are certain aspects of your development, assuming you're developing something in the high-tech space, don't go off and reinvent connectivity or billing or global connectivity. Someone's done it for you. Take their API, leverage their API, and focus all your energy and all those precious investment dollars on the differentiation that you want to focus on. Don't get distracted by thinking that you can do this little corner piece as better than someone else did on your journey to doing your executing your original idea. Focus on the original idea, leverage APIs everywhere else, and I think you'll save a lot of money, a lot of dollars, and focus on just your idea.
All right, I think that's a good place to leave off. So thanks to the panel, thanks to everybody in the room.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Ryan and the panel there.